we cannot change anything unless we accept it. What if I told you that your inability to move on from your ex has nothing to do with love and everything to do with unfinished psychological business that you're completely unaware of? The person you think you can't live without might just be a projection of something missing inside you. Carl Jung discovered something that explains why some people get stuck in endless cycles of heartbreak while others move on effortlessly. It's not about how much you love them, it's about what they represented that you haven't found within yourself. Think about your ex right now. Is it really them you miss, or is it how you felt about yourself when you were with them? By the end of this video, you'll understand the psychological mechanism that's keeping you trapped and how to break free from it forever. Let me tell you about Michael, who couldn't stop thinking about his ex Sarah even 2 years after their breakup. He'd convinced himself it was true love, that she was the one who got away. But what Michael didn't realize was that Sarah had become a psychological prison, and he was both the prisoner and the jailer. Jung understood that what we call attachment to another person is often attachment to an idealized version of ourselves. When you can't move on from your ex, you're not just missing them, you're missing the version of yourself that existed in that relationship. Here's what's really happening. Your ex has become what Jung called a projection screen for your unlived potential. They carry parts of your personality that you've disowned, dreams you've abandoned, or aspects of yourself you've never fully developed. Losing them feels like losing yourself because psychologically it is. Michael's breakthrough came when he realized he didn't actually miss Sarah's personality quirks or even their conversations. He missed feeling confident, creative, and spontaneous, qualities that had emerged when he was with her but had disappeared from his life after the breakup. Jung identified this as complex formation. When certain people become entangled with our deepest psychological needs, your ex becomes associated with feelings of wholeness, creativity, confidence, or love that you struggle to access on your own. This creates an unconscious dependency that feels like love, but is actually psychological incompletion. For men, Jung called this the anima, the feminine aspect of the psyche that seeks expression through relationships with women. For women, it's the animus, the masculine aspect. When your ex carried this projection, losing them feels like losing access to an essential part of yourself. People who move on quickly from breakups aren't heartless, they're psychologically integrated. They don't lose access to parts of themselves when relationships end, because those parts aren't dependent on another person for expression. They carry their wholeness within them. Unable to move on, you begin idealizing your ex and the relationship. Your memory selectively edits out the problems, the incompatibilities, the reasons it ended. This isn't because the relationship was perfect, it's because your psyche is protecting the projection. Admitting the relationship had flaws means confronting what you haven't developed in yourself. Michael realized he had a pattern. Every woman he'd been unable to get over had been creative, confident, and emotionally expressive, qualities he possessed but had never fully owned. He'd unconsciously chosen partners who embodied what he was afraid to express himself. Jung observed that we unconsciously repeat patterns until we become conscious of them. If you keep attracting the same type of person or finding yourself in similar relationship dynamics, your psyche is trying to complete unfinished business, but it's looking in the wrong place. Sometimes the inability to move on isn't about projection, it's about trauma bonding. If your relationship involved emotional inconsistency, push-pull dynamics, or intermittent reinforcement, your nervous system became addicted to the unpredictable reward schedule. This isn't love, it's psychological conditioning. Jung understood that our adult relationships often replay childhood dynamics. Your ex might remind you of a parent who was emotionally unavailable, creating a compulsive need to win their love. You're not trying to get your ex back, you're trying to heal a much older wound. What you can't move on from isn't the actual relationship, it's the fantasy of what the relationship could have become. You're mourning potential, not reality. This fantasy relationship exists only in your mind, which is why no amount of evidence about incompatibility can break the spell. If your self-worth became entangled with being chosen by this specific person, losing them feels like losing your value as a human being. This isn't about them being objectively superior, it's about unconsciously making them the arbiter of your worth. Michael started focusing on developing the qualities he'd admired in Sarah within himself. He took up painting, something he'd always wanted to do but felt wasn't him. He practiced being more emotionally expressive. Slowly, his obsession with Sarah began to fade as he reclaimed these projected parts of himself. Jung called the process of reclaiming your projections individuation, becoming whole by integrating all aspects of your personality. When you stop looking for completeness in another person and start developing it within yourself, you naturally become less attached to specific individuals. Start by identifying what qualities you admired most in your ex. Were they confident, creative, emotionally available, adventurous? These aren't random attractions. They're roadmaps to your own undeveloped potential. Your ex was showing you what you need to cultivate within yourself. When you begin developing these qualities independently, something remarkable happens. Your energy shifts from desperate attachment to authentic attraction. You stop needing specific people to feel whole and start choosing relationships from a place of completeness rather than neediness. Every time you find yourself fantasizing about your ex, ask yourself, what am I really missing? What feeling or quality am I trying to access through them? Then take one small action to develop that quality within yourself. This breaks the psychological dependency that keeps you stuck. True healing requires grieving not just the relationship, but the version of yourself that needed that relationship to feel complete. This grief is necessary because you're literally letting a part of your identity die, the part that believed you needed someone else to be whole. As Michael developed his own creativity and emotional expression, he naturally attracted different types of partners. He was no longer drawn to women who carried his projections because he no longer needed anyone to carry them. His relationships became partnerships between two whole people rather than two halves seeking completion. Jung's work predates modern attachment theory, but they complement each other perfectly. If you have an anxious attachment style, you're likely projecting security onto partners. If you're avoidant, you might be projecting intimacy. Understanding your attachment style helps identify what you're unconsciously seeking through others. You might find yourself comparing every new person to your ex, and they always fall short. This isn't because your ex was objectively better, it's because you're comparing real people to an idealized projection. No one can compete with a fantasy, because fantasies aren't constrained by reality. Jung understood that some relationships serve a spiritual purpose. They come into our lives to show us what we need to develop within ourselves. From this perspective, your ex was a teacher, and the lesson was about reclaiming your own power, creativity, or capacity for love. The paradox of moving on is that the harder you try to forget your ex, the more stuck you become. Surrendering the need to move on, while simultaneously working on your own integration, creates the psychological space for natural healing to occur. Start a daily practice of developing the qualities you projected onto your ex. If they were confident, practice small acts of confidence. If they were creative, engage in creative activities. If they were emotionally open, practice vulnerability with safe people. This active integration accelerates the healing process. Examine all your significant relationships for patterns. What qualities do you consistently admire in others? What traits do you feel you lack? These patterns reveal your projections and show you exactly what you need to develop within yourself to become psychologically complete. Sometimes we resist moving on because we fear losing the connection to the parts of ourselves that emerged in the relationship. But here's the truth, those parts belong to you, not to the relationship. You can access them independently once you stop believing you need someone else to activate them. 2 years later, Michael could think about Sarah with gratitude rather than longing. He realized she had been a mirror, reflecting back his own potential. The pain of losing her had forced him to develop aspects of himself he might never have discovered otherwise. You'll know you've successfully integrated your projections when you can think about your ex without emotional charge, when you're grateful for what the relationship taught you, and when you're attracted to people for who they are rather than what they represent to you. The real reason you can't move on isn't because you lost someone irreplaceable, it's because you haven't yet claimed the irreplaceable parts of yourself that you saw reflected in them. Your ex was never your missing piece, they were a mirror showing you what was already inside you. You have a choice right now. Continue believing that one specific person holds the key to your happiness, or begin the work of reclaiming your projections and becoming psychologically complete. The first path leads to endless suffering, the second leads to authentic freedom. What quality did you most admire in your ex? Share in the comments. Your honesty might help someone else recognize their own projections. Remember, naming the pattern is the first step to breaking free from it. Jung believed that every person who triggers strong emotions in us is a teacher in disguise. Your ex taught you something crucial about yourself. Not that you need them to be complete, but that you have the capacity for the very qualities you admired in them. The lesson was never about getting them back, it was about getting yourself back.